Control TV. I am Gimba Omar, and we're being joined by the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, the APC, Mr. Felix Morka. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us at this time. It seems you've gone off already, but
I'm here.
A lot has happened. I'm unable to see your visuals. Maybe you must have touched something. Maybe you should try to link back to us again because we cannot see you at this time. The trending and the burning issue right now is Betta Edu, as you know. Okay, yeah, he just left, but we'll try to get him back as quickly as possible. Felix Morka is the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, the APC. We're going to be talking about the suspension of Betta Edu by the President Bola Ahmed TINUBU. She's not alone in this. An investigation is being carried out by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, and also we understand that the former minister of the former minister also of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Sadia Umar Farouk, is also under the watch of the EFCC in that manner. And okay, thank you, Felix, for joining us again. For a second or two there, we lost your visuals. But Felix, now that we're into this quagmire of sorts, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Betty Edu, has been suspended by Mr. President, your principal, and the leader of your party, the APC. Did the president act in accordance to the dictates of your constitution as a party, to start with?
Thank you very much for having me on your program. Yes, the president acted properly. He acted exactly as he was required to do by the constitution of the country, and by the laws of our land. He did exactly what the law imposed on him as a duty to do. And he acted very quickly and timeously in this matter to order an investigation of the allegations that have been made against the minister and some other officials of the social investment program. That is the right thing to do because, when people are alleged to have done wrong, there's only one thing known to law. It's called due process. Due process requires that an investigation should be conducted and then recommendations made for, either exculpating that individual or indicting them of wrongdoing. It is after that that the legal process may then continue towards prosecution if there is basis, if there are findings, facts that warrant such further action. That will be done.
Okay, having said that now, Betta is the main focus now. Let's not just try to distract the issues. Betta went ahead to approve payments to some contractors of the ministry. Why do you think that you have to use contractors instead of, as it were, members of staff of the ministry? Is there a constraint there?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Use contractors for payment or payment to contractors? What?
Payment to contractors.
Look, every government agency, if I understand your question, has reason in the course of their official programming, to award consultancies or contracts to get the job done. Staff of the ministry, of any ministry, they're not necessarily experts on everything and, are not required to perform every task that needs to be performed under a program or under a ministry. Like any company, like any business, like any entity, any organization, they also have the right or power, sometimes even the duty, to call for bid by private companies or by entities that have the requisite competence or qualifications to perform that act, and then to make selections amongst them based on some established criteria. And of course, when those companies perform those tasks or deliver those services, yes, they are required to be paid. That is, a conventional modus operandi of any ministry or any government institution, for that matter.
But are there bureaucratic bottlenecks do you see for ministers? I mean, you said that this is almost getting to become a practice. Are there bureaucratic bottlenecks that prevents ministers from, you know, uh, using what they have? Dig into the purse, look, introspect, and use people that we have. Are those, what you call them now, civil servants? Do they lack a competency, or what seems to be the problem? Because when you look at beyond the humanitarian ministry, every other ministry seems to have that same issue. How can your government, for instance, now
I'm
with a
not quite
renewed
sure.
hope agenda, how does your government now with a renewed hope agenda plans to address this issue?
No, I'm not sure what the issue you are stating really for discussion is. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you, or I don't get your point. Are you suggesting that ministries or government agencies must be self-contained agencies when it comes to expertise, competence, and performance? That
Yes,
government
because
agencies must not.
the reason why I
Yes.
say so, Felix, is because in every ministry you have these departments that will help the ministry to grow, to help the minister to implement some of those policies that they have set out to implement. But
Yes.
where then does it come that you will have to allow the ministers to go beyond what that beyond that ministerial level, and
No.
have what you call as
No.
consultants to do some of those jobs?
Look, no, that is not how it works, really. In reality, not only in Nigeria, everywhere else in the world. Government contracts a lot of activities, a lot of services, a lot of products to third parties to produce, because sometimes those services are more efficiently delivered by third parties than by staff whose main job is actually to coordinate the implementation of policy. There's no civil service requirement or ministry guideline that says that every policy or every program that a ministry is to implement must be done exclusively by its staff. Because quite often, a ministry cannot employ every requisite expertise area of field of specialization to bring them on staff full time. Now, don't forget that some of these activities are very time bound. So if you are going to, deliver a service that takes 3 weeks to perform, and then because of that, you go hire somebody to make them a resident staff and pay their salaries and carry all of the overhead in relation to them, that is grossly inefficient. So, there's nothing wrong with a government department contracting services or the performance or the provision of products or any expert, kind of activity to third parties that have the requisite competence that meet the criteria. Because once they are hired,
So
then they come under the
on that basis,
yes.
it is right to say that Beta Edu did not commit any infringements.
See, look, I am not, there's a panel that the president has set up to deal with matters regarding what happened and what didn't happen with respect to Beta and the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. I won't go into those evaluative or conclusive conversations because that's already within the mandate of a committee set up by the president. But the point I'm trying to make is that just generally speaking, that ministries are within their remit to contract out jobs and services to companies. That is the way it works all over the world. So the issue here, I think, for that the president has ordered an investigation is a comprehensive one, but I think the more proximate issue had to do with the payment, the memo, for example, that was allegedly issued by the minister, requesting payment of a certain amount into a private account. Now, that and all other known and unknown, events within the ministry fall within the mandate of this investigative committee headed by the coordinating minister of the economy and the minister of finance to unravel. And I think that this conversation must be put in perspective. Now, the event that happened has happened. the president very swiftly, did exactly what he was required to do. And I think that, that is how a democracy functions. So now that an investigation has been ordered, we must now take a pause and allow that investigation to unfold. And then they'll make their findings, on the basis of which the president then will give further directives. In the meantime, he has also ordered the EFCC to join in looking into some of the allegations that have come out of that ministry. So I think between the EFCC and the presidential committee, led by the minister for the coordinating minister for the economy, I think we must await to see, what they throw up, and then I'm quite sure that the president and his, team will, keep Nigerians briefed on the outcomes of those investigations.
While we wait for those outcomes to come, Felix, Halima Shehu is also suspended, as she's mentioned, the national coordinator and chief executive of the National Social Investment Program. Sadia Umar Farouk is also being investigated by the EFCC. So also is Betta Edu. These are prominent women that have held very strategic positions, albeit same ministry. Does it raise any question? Is there something that is amiss about that ministry that perhaps is not well thought out? I did speak with Mr. Johnson Chukwu yesterday on this very same issue, and his thoughts about that is that that ministry, humanitarian affairs, is not well thought out. What is your ministry what is your government going to do about that ministry, such that if Morka tomorrow you become Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, you're very likely to be visited by the EFCC. How do we prevent that?
No, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the ministry, or for that matter, with any ministry. I think that these things are really occurrences at the human level, where people, within their human agency, do things or choose to do things sometimes that offend the rules and the regulations that exist. Now, public sector reform is an unfinished business. It's an ongoing challenge for any country. Even the advanced countries continue to find ways to improve and make their operations more transparent and more, liable to public scrutiny. Now, we are also required to continue to innovate, to improve on the way our ministries, our government departments, our civil service, the bureaucracy, every system of government, the way they operate, the same way that, Control TV or like any private organization also struggles to innovate and improve systems to make sure they're more transparent and more accountable. That is something that this president has made a cardinal focus for his administration to continue to. And by the way, the actions we're discussing of suspending some of the officials in that department and the ministry, is consistent with the promise of the president to actually govern in a way that lends itself to more public scrutiny and review. So out of this discussion, hopefully, will come by the committee or through the EFCC or through some other agency, ideas and recommendations that can then make that ministry, and for that matter, all other ministries, better positioned to perform optimally and perform to the standards of expectations of their mandate. Now, these things happen. Sometimes some of the best innovations come out of, difficulties or challenges or problems. It can be creative. Yes, you can politicize that, make it an issue that it shouldn't be, but you can also be mature and draw lessons from that and say never again. We must make these changes to our financial procedures or administrative systems, whereby it becomes more difficult for any one individual, whether minister or permanent secretary or other officials, to take action that can compromise the integrity of an entire institution. I think that to me is what personally I'm also hoping to get out of this process. Other than just the idea of the call for people to be crucified. But even if you want to crucify anybody, this is not the time of of old. We are in a constitutional democracy. There are facilities in place, presumption of innocence. We must avail that to everyone, give them the opportunity to explain what they have done. If in the end their explanation falls short of the standard of, the required standard of due process, then they will be referable to, further action, including disciplinary action, prosecution, or punishment, as the case may be. But we are not there yet, and I think we need to hold our peace until these processes have time to, unfold as they should.
Yeah, as you said, Felix, processes. That is the underlining word here, process. There should be a laid down standard procedure to which any disbursement is made. I know for once, correct me if I'm wrong, that the permanent secretaries in the ministries are in charge of, they are like the financial um, uh, appropriators in those ministries. Nothing would have gone under the noses in terms of payment made to anyone, any consultant, or call it whatever, especially in this case of Beta Edu, without the involvement of the permanent secretaries. What do you have to say to that? Will, if a hammer were to fall, would it be totally on Beta's head, or will the permanent secretaries have a question to answer as well?
Your question calls for me to speculate on a number of issues. You're making, your question is, sort of resting on a lot of assumptions. First assumption is
Let me
that,
make it clear. Let me make it clear to you, Felix.
yes,
Whenever a check is supposed to be written for payments, the permanent secretaries are in charge of that. Would you say that Beta is now culpable in this case by ordering those payments to be made?
see, the question you're asking, the answer to that question will be offered by the committee or by the EFCC. That is exactly the core question that the committee was set up to answer. When you ask the question as though you know, for example, that the memos and the payments, first of all, we don't know that that payment was ever made. I have not seen any, evidence, even in the public space, that beyond the memo that says make this payment to this individual, I have not seen or reviewed any information that has confirmed that money actually transferred. So in law, there's something we call inchoate, transactions that you initiate but you don't conclude. We don't know that. These are facts that we must know in order to, be able to make conclusive, definitive statements about culpability or whether the permanent secretary should have done. Because we don't know what the permanent secretary did or didn't do. It is only the process of investigation that will now reveal who the key actors were. Were all those who were supposed to have acted, did they act? If they acted, why did they act? Did they act wrongly? Did they act correctly? Was the minister overbearing? Did she, overreach her authority? These are factual questions that are not, to be answered by, mere speculation. I don't have the facts, therefore, I will hold my thought until the facts become available. And I
Okay.
advise that.
All right, Felix. I mean, your party, the APC, is at the helm of affairs, as it were, now, and a lot of people are calling to see that the progress that we make in this country during this administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu is one that takes us leaps and bounds ahead, not retrogressive. What is your party doing to reposition, for instance, in its new renewed agenda, to reposition, especially the civil service, such that we have them to be more efficient? Why? Because if we have an efficient civil service, this kind of issues will not even arise in the first place, Felix. Do you agree?
Look, there's no question that our civil service requires more attention, more reforms, strengthening of their procedures and processes, their methods of, evaluation, the way they operate, their modus operandi. All of that needs to be looked at. But you will also agree that reforming that behemoth called the civil service, that bureaucracy, is not a day's job. It's not something you do by fiat. They require very painstaking reviews and evaluation and then monitoring before you begin to, completely throw the civil service into, that tailspin. yes, do we desire a better, more efficient civil service? It is imperative that we have that in order for our country and our economy and our democracy to flourish. We need that. Like yesterday, is this government prepared to engage that task? Yes. This president has said so. And, from the appointments of heads of, service to people in the ministry, permanent secretaries and all of that, care is being taken to put people who are also reform-minded, who have ideas, who are desirous of transforming the status quo, and in fact shaking the table and hoping that things get better. Now, with the event that we are discussing with the humanitarian affairs, I am quite certain that at the end of this investigation, a lot will be revealed about where there are gaps or where there are shortfalls or shortcomings, where strengthening or reform changes need to be made, where clarity needs to be injected into the system, where protocols and procedures need to be fleshed out in more detail so that people are not making assumptions whether this is the way to do it or that way, where transparency of procedure actually becomes the basis for transparency of action. Because sometimes, quite frankly, in many of our institutions, when you get there, there's so much lack of clarity that when people come, they begin to use discretion. Now, we must eliminate or at least narrow the margins of discretion in our public service, not just in our public service, in every aspect of our national life. Because where a police officer decides whether to detain you or not to detain you, or to shoot you or not to shoot you, no. Procedures and protocols must be made clearer and more self-evident so that those who perform these functions will actually be guided more objectively rather than any sort of subjective replacement of process with their own idea of what is right or wrong. Because if you go, I think that people are going to be shocked at the end of the day when these reports actually come out, because a whole lot will be revealed than meets the eye. Because this is civil service.
I'm also wondering, Felix.
With
I'm
all
also
tolerance,
wondering.
that's my
My
confidence.
apologies. My apologies to butt in.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
also wondering because I've heard this comments ever since this started 3 days ago that perhaps it's a matter of inexperience and better. I mean, she has worked with the Cross River State former governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade, as a commissioner. She would have known the processes and how these things work out in government circles. But some have alluded that perhaps it is lack of experience and perhaps you may be too young. Do you share those sentiments too?
Again, I think it's unfair for me to again begin to speculate as to the factors that may have contributed to the events that we're discussing. And again, I speak for the party, and again, I'm not going to speculate. I've not done any diagnostics. I don't know what factors played into this whole process, and I don't know what exactly the outcome really is. What is the real substance here? Are we looking at just somebody who had an intention to do something but didn't do it, or somebody who had an intention to do something that actually did it? Because there's a qualitative difference between that. And I don't know what factors predisposed the actors, in the way they acted. And even though these are members of our party or ministers serving in an APC-led government, there is no mechanism by which the president or the party, as an institution, or all of us who are members or national officers of the party, can discern what any individual in any government department or anywhere is thinking, or why they are thinking what they are thinking. Thinking it's about your humanity. It's about your freedom to exercise your God-given faculties. So it is only when you act in an objective fashion that we can say, no, your action is wrong or right. But nobody goes into your thoughts to know what you're thinking. So my point is that, again, as I said earlier, we must wait, on a time in the future, after the reports are out and they have laid the facts. I'm happy to come back and we can pick on those, findings and discuss them. But, before that, I won't go further to speculate on some of these factors.
Felix, what in your view must be done to avert, shall I say, if you will, for the lack of a better word, to avoid carelessness in the operations of our ministries today?
Look, there's no other way to forestall or prevent or ensure, better quality service delivery in the Nigerian civil service or in the civil service everywhere else. Now, you cannot count on the subjective mind of human beings to necessarily do the right thing always. Even people who try to do the right thing all the time sometimes can make a mistake, and sometimes their mistake can be the result of someone else's mistake. They build on somebody else's mistake, and they become, a colossal mistake. We don't know yet. The only way to prevent this everywhere in the world is to reform and reform and reform procedures and make them more objective, more transparent, more, measurable, more liable to be monitored and evaluated. And I think that, this probe that the president has launched on the humanitarian ministry, I am believing that when it comes, there may be a template that can be, gotten from that can then be, extended in, an effort to reform procedures for other ministries. Because, this thing can happen. We're talking about humanitarian ministry. It can happen to any other ministry. I mean, and it does happen indeed. Since the beginning of time in this country, we have witnessed, from one era to the other, a lot of absurdities and things that happen with, public officers. But the way to rein it in is to, again, clarify procedures and hold people accountable, which is exactly what this president is attempting to do with respect to the case under review at this time.
That would be a good place to let it rest. Mr. Felix Morka, the National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, the APC, that is trying to give the people of Nigeria renewed hope. We hope that you make good progress along that line too. Felix, I most sincerely thank you for giving us your time to talk to us here on Control TV, Front Row Politics. And for those that are watching us now and who will watch us later, always hook on to Control TV on our YouTube platform, as well as on other social media platforms, Facebook, on Twitter, or X, if you will, on Instagram, and so on. Until we come your way again, I'm Gimbo Umar, and bye for now.
Thank you.